around economic transformation and growth, and also issues of politics, legitimacy, and governance. All these matters must be addressed if we're going to grow the economy in the year 2019. The big picture, what do we want as a country? We want shared economic prosperity. We want inclusive economic growth. That's the agenda. That's our vision for Zimbabwe. How do we get there? 3 pillars. We must address matters of politics, the issues around governance, the issues around constitutionalism, and matters of legitimacy. But in terms of the economy, we must address the macroeconomic fundamentals, the currency crisis, inflation, the economic fundamentals must be addressed. But what will take us to the promised land is economic transformation, growing this Zimbabwean economy, investment in the economy of Zimbabwe, innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology. The 4th industrial revolution is what's going to take us to the promised land. Now, this conference is very presumptuous. The first year of the Second Republic. Who told you it's the Second Republic? How dare you, Mr. Organizer? What have you smoked? Anyway, I don't mind, but we must make sure when we say the Second Republic, we have justification, we have rationale for saying so. When we say we have a new dispensation, we must have justification, rationality, and logic to back it up. So I just want to tease it out of you that please don't abuse these terms. Second Republic, explain to us how it is second. New dispensation, explain to us how it's a new dispensation. Really? But anyway, that's not my topic. That's for Gisai and others. The nature of the challenges. There are economic problems that we need to address in the country. There are political problems we have to address in the country. My mandate is mainly concentrating on the economy, but the two are linked. You can't really address the economic matters without addressing the political matters. So let us make sure in these 2 days, somehow we emphasize the economy, yes, but we also talk about the matters of politics that affect our economy. What are the challenges which we must address this year in 2019 in Zimbabwe? Low production, low productivity, low capacity utilization, low business growth. We must somehow, Madam Chair, in this year in 2019, do something to drive production, do something to drive productivity, do something to push up capacity utilization, but more importantly, business growth is stagnant at the moment. So the incentives must be in place, the investment must come in place, the enabling environment must be created so that we resolve those matters. There's major deindustrialization in Zimbabwe. The industries, Bulawayo was the industry hub. Major deindustrialization. Somehow, let us stimulate the growth of industries. Let us stop the deindustrialization of Zimbabwe. Trade deficit, a major issue we need to address. Lack of competitiveness. Our products, our exports are not competitive. Our industries are not competitive. In this year, in 2019, we must address matters of the trade deficit and matters of competitiveness. It's a debt-ridden economy, $9 billion deficit, $9 billion debt, domestic debt and international debt. We must address that matter in the year 2019. Currency crisis, and we'll say a bit more about that. It's just a symptom, but the way we address it will help us address the major macroeconomic matters in the country. High sovereign risk that we have in the country, it undermines FDI. Investors are worried about Zimbabwe. It's a risky territory for investment. Reckless spending by a bloated government with a bloated advisory committee, which includes Jana. Where's Jana? So it's a bloated government. It's reckless in its expenditure. but I'm sure they'll cut it down to size when they're advised by the advisors to cut it down to size. A shrinking tax base. We must expand the tax base. Let's not overtax people. Let us create jobs, create industries, so that the base that is producing the taxes is wider, so that we can solve unemployment, so we can improve job creation. These are the matters. I only have 40 minutes. These are the matters that must be addressed or begin to be addressed in the year 2019. We go to look at this and say, how do we expand our tax base? How do we drive employment? How do we create more jobs? How do we make sure the workers are getting a living wage? How do we make sure we're producing more businesses and entrepreneurs as opposed to workers? The currency crisis is just a symptom of the major macroeconomic problems within the country. Before you resolve the currency crisis, you need to do 5 things. The first thing, before you introduce a currency, by the way, 2 weeks ago, they introduced a currency by another name, RTGS dollar. It's a new currency. Devaluation, effectively. If you had $5,000 US in the bank, now you have $1,000. Massive destruction of value. Before you address the currency problem in Zimbabwe, you must do the following. Build up reserves to back up the new currency. You must deserve a new currency. If there are no reserves to back up the currency, there should be no new currency. There must be fiscal consolidation, cutting down on expenditure. These are the reasons why there's high inflation in the country. If you don't cut down on expenditure, government expenditure, if there's no fiscal consolidation, you can't do currency reforms. So in the year 2019, let us build up reserves to back up our currency. In the year 2019, let us do fiscal consolidation, cut down on expenditure, so that we can resolve the challenges around our currency. Productivity and production. You can't even begin to talk about a new currency or resolving the currency matter without production, without productivity. Productivity and production should be the basis on which we resolve our matters of the currency. More importantly, when you introduce a new currency or when you are addressing the currency issues, you must protect people's savings. You must protect investments. You must protect deposits by ring-fencing people's deposits. For example, pensioners. If a pensioner has $20,000 in their bank, they're not going to work again. If you dollarize or if you do what was done last week and destroy that value, then they are not protected. What you need to do is to say, for example, if you have $20,000 in the bank today, it will remain $20,000. If you bring any new money, then we can do a 1 to 2.5, 1 to 5. But you must ring fence and protect the deposits of poor people, the deposits of our workers, the deposits of companies, the deposits of our pensioners. They are the major victims when we create chaos by destroying value through unplanned currency reforms. So minimizing destruction of value. There will always be some destruction of value when you do currency reforms. What we want to do is to minimize the destruction by carrying out ring fencing of savings. Now, confidence and trust. Remember, by definition, money is fiction. Money is a myth. Money is part of what Harari calls emergent realities. The US dollar that you have, when you say I've got $100 note, it's not worth $100 in terms of gold or diamonds. It's the confidence you have that this paper, if I take it to the bank, if I take it to the shop, I'll get goods that are of the value of $100. So all money is a function of confidence and trust. Money is a myth. Currency is a myth. Even in America, in Europe, in China, everywhere. Currency and money depends on trust and confidence. A long time ago, money was based on dollars, what was called the gold, on gold, the gold standard. They actually had to print money which was in gold notes or had some gold in it. Then they moved from the gold standard to fiat currency or fiat money, where now money is a representation. So in any economy, money has to be based on confidence. Now in Zimbabwe, there's no confidence in the economy. There's no confidence in our politics. What more confidence about our money, about our currency? So it's important that, number one, we build confidence in the economy, confidence in the country, and more importantly, confidence around our new currency or whatever currency we come up with. So these 5 things are important before you even discuss what needs to be done about the currency crisis. But remember, when you solve the currency matter, you are only addressing a symptom of the problems we need to address in the economy, but that will help. The political problems, you got to address the political problems if you're going to grow the economy in the year 2019. Why? Because politics is what creates an enabling environment. Right now, the environment in Zimbabwe is not enabling at all. It is disenabling. Why? There's a nagging political crisis of legitimacy. Some Zimbabweans do not accept this president. They're saying, you are not my president. You rigged the elections. So the question of legitimacy must be addressed. The question of governance must be addressed so that all Zimbabweans are flocking and moving in the same direction. The issues coming out of the 2018 elections must be addressed by Zimbabweans together. The legitimacy challenge, the governance challenge. There's lack of leadership in both the government and in the opposition. Lack of statesmanship. There's need for leadership across the board. Zimbabweans must work together. Zimbabweans must put Zimbabwe first. In terms of the government, it's obvious there's lack of leadership if you look at the way they're addressing the currency issue and the way people are concentrating on 2023. You've just come out of the elections and you say, ED Fair 2023, shame on you. You've just won an election. What's important now is focusing on the economy, addressing the economy. If we're going to grow the economy in the year 2019, we must stop all the nonsense about ED Fair 2023. It must be the economy fair. We must address matters of the economy and not the nonsense about 5 years from now. In terms of my friends in the opposition, I have a lot of respect for the opposition. They did very well, even by the rigged elections. 2.1 million votes are a lot of votes. They did very well in parliament and everything. But I also want to urge them to think and be strategic. What do you want? One day, we don't want an inclusive government. We just want reforms. We want to talk about reforms. Another day, we want an NTA. An NTA, by the way, by definition, is where all the parties go aside. You have a technical team of people running the country for 5 years. They create all the conditions that are necessary, and then we have an election. It's a joke, because there's no one who accepts that. The opposition won't accept that, because they want to be in power, in government, and ZANU won't accept that. Now, a week ago, I hear we want 2 years from Nangagwa, 2 years for MDC. And then the next day, we don't want that. Make sure you are clear about what you want as the opposition. You are the victims, you have issues that have to be addressed, but at the same time, let us see statesmanship, let us see leadership in civic society, leadership in my colleagues in the MDC, and leadership in government. There is lack of leadership across the board. We need statesmanship across the board. No holds barred here. No sacred cows. Yes for dialogue, but the nature of the dialogue is important. You can't have 20 lumpen elements and bring them to sit and say, I'm having dialogue. Dialogue of who? Without MDC alliance. Again, if ZANU and the government are serious about dialogue, they must dialogue with the MDC alliance. Those 20 people don't matter. They're irrelevant. We can bring civic society and business and MDC alliance and talk. Why do you need a guy with 2 votes? You want to talk about what? So again, seriousness about dialogue means the nature of the dialogue must be serious and bona fide. A neutral convener and all those good things and so on. Let us have proper dialogue. But also, I must say to my colleagues in the opposition again, you must also understand that you are very weak. Unlike us, Morgan and I were very strong. You are not. I want to be very honest. In our case, Morgan and I together, we controlled Parliament. 109 MPs, Zanu was in the minority. We were powerful. Morgan came first in the first election. And then the runoff, he pulled out, which was a strategic move. So if we remove the runoff, Morgan was ahead. So he had that power. But more importantly, for us, South Africa rejected Mugabe's nullity. SADC rejected Mugabe's nullity. The AU rejected Mugabe's nullity. Unfortunately for my colleagues right now, South Africa has embraced this regime. SADC has embraced these guys, and AU the same. So the bargaining power is minimized. Okay? And I'm not saying this to say anything, but to say, understand that Masamba Asiana, your bargaining power is not as strong. But more importantly, the two-thirds majority that ZANU has is not being challenged by the opposition. So what I'm saying is everyone must come together and understand the balance of forces. What we want from the dialogue, we want genuine and non-conditional dialogue, which will produce confidence in the economy, confidence in the country, which will produce trust, which will bring cohesion and focus on an inclusive economic transformation, on growth and shared prosperity, on embracing the Second Republic. So the Second Republic will only come in if there's dialogue, if there's an understanding in our country. So I spent a bit of time on this because it is foolhardy, it is not productive to concentrate on economic measures alone without addressing the legitimacy issue, governance, and politics. When you say Second Republic, what do you mean, or what should you mean? You should mean a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous nation. That's not what we're getting right now. We must work together as Zimbabweans to have a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous nation. A new dispensation is earned and not declared. And a new dispensation has to be national, has to be collective. And the ambition must have two components: a shared national vision and a national brand. So as we talk as Zimbabweans, civic society, the opposition, and ZANU, we must create a shared national vision, which becomes the basis of the Second Republic. We must have a shared competitive national identity, which is our national brand. And these are the questions we must ask ourselves. What is the state of our society, the economy, and politics? What do we want to achieve as a people and as a country? Where do we want our society, our politics, and our economy to be in a bounded time frame, in 2030, 2040? We must answer these questions together as civic society, as opposition parties, and also as business, so that we have a national vision, the strategy being our game plan, and then, of course, we must do things. And I like what Sivio is doing, measuring. You must measure what is done. So you must have what is called an implementation matrix, which monitors and evaluates your activities, and all these branding questions, but I won't spend time on this. We need tourism, we need investment, we need governance, culture, and people. We must be known well in those areas, what's called the Hexagon of Branding. This is what needs to be done in 2019. Get the framework right, get the vision inclusive and owned by everyone, get the national brand correct, and in particular, start driving investment into the country. Okay? We must go beyond the current entrepreneurship levels, the current technology levels in the country, and embrace what's called the fourth industrial revolution. By the way, I've looked at the TSP, the Transitional Stabilization Program. It's a good document, but missing on a number of things. In particular, it's missing on the efforts of the fourth industrial revolution. I know the president has said a few things, very unstructured and very unclinical statements on the fourth industrial revolution. I'm going to give you the proper brief on the fourth industrial revolution from the professor, not from all these other lumbed elements. The first industrial revolution was about water and steam. The second was about electric power. The third was about electronics and the ICT revolution. Now we're talking about a revolution that combines the physical, the digital, and the biological. And the revolution has a huge speed, a major area of scope, and also it's what we call a systems impact. The growth of artificial intelligence and its extensive use in the deployment of e-commerce. We must, as Zimbabweans in the year 2019, have an understanding of the fourth industrial revolution and ask ourselves, what can we do to drive our economy using these elements? Artificial intelligence, intelligent algorithms, augmented reality, human augmentation, big data, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, nanotechnology, drones, and robotics and mechatronics. By the way, you might think, oh, these things are far-fetched, Mutambara, they're for Japan, they're for America, they're for Europe. No, think about EcoCash, think about M-Pesa. There's nothing in Japan, there's nothing in America, there's nothing in Europe. This is as good as EcoCash or M-Pesa. Why? Because our lack of banking infrastructure, our lack of brick and mortar banking made us adopt banking on the phone. Faster than Japan, faster than America, faster than Europe. So currently, as we speak, M-Pesa and EcoCash are global best practice. So if we think very carefully, some of these technologies can be easier to adopt, more effective to adopt in Africa than in Europe. 3D printing, biotechnology, renewable energy, energy storage, quantum computing, cloud computing, blockchain technologies. All these goodies, how can we use them in the year 2019? How do we understand them in the year 2019 to grow the economy in Zimbabwe? Okay? So that you can understand what's happening, I'm going to put in some voices here so you can hear what other people are saying at MIT, at Harvard, at Apple, so that you have a global sense of this revolution called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Global CEOs, what they're saying about this.
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
That was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
We need a different economic model that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, and that will be focused not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being.
We have energy technologies that can power our civilization, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
If we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The question of adding quality to quantity, it's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from
In the next few years, I expect the digital transformation of life to bring huge changes. Everything from science to healthcare to sensors to robotics.
Whether it's information technology and the acceleration we see in artificial intelligence, you just look across the board and you can see a lot is happening.
It's really the notion of digital technology pervasively impacting every walk of life in every vertical industry on all parts of the globe.
The speed is mind-boggling. What I'm particularly concerned about it is how little the world is prepared for the fourth industrial revolution.
If we are not innovative, if we're not creative enough, it will be very difficult to survive in this century.
Countries in emerging markets should take the lead. Mobile platforms will define how fast the fourth industrial revolution will be embraced by the countries.
It's very difficult to try to bridge the gap between a borderless industrial revolution that's being governed by different policies and regulations in each territory and country.
We're always looking for new technology and how it makes the process more efficient, how it makes the quality higher. But one of the things that it's really creating is a need for those that have a technical background.
52% of the encounters with our primary care physicians were handled virtually. Just a massive change.
The technologies available today to scientists.
Okay, you have a sense now of what's involved from the different players, from business, from academia. Now, what's important for Zimbabwe is to understand that this is a revolution. And if we are not careful, we're going to be left behind. Most Africans in most African countries did not participate in the first industrial revolution, in the second and in third. And if we don't get into this revolution, again, we're going to be left behind. What we need to do, it can't be business as usual. You need a different way of educating yourselves, educating our high school students and our university people by giving them what's called critical thinking, mastering how to think, not telling them what to think, but how to think. Problem-solving skills, structured thinking. So the way we teach in high school, the way we teach in the university has to change in the year 2019. Blended learning, interdisciplinary approaches. Don't tell me I'm a superstar lawyer who doesn't know about philosophy, art, or computers. Or don't tell me you're an engineer who doesn't understand philosophy, the law, or politics. In the Industrial Revolution we're talking about, we want what are called Renaissance men and Renaissance women who can talk about philosophy, talk about mathematics, talk about the Bible. Blended learning, ecosystem thinking, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, existential intelligence, spiritual intelligence. These are the new types of intelligence we need in the year 2019 to grow the economy. Acquisition of key competencies as opposed to traditional education. So the way we teach has to be different. You must acquire competencies as opposed to traditional education. You want judgment, negotiation, cognitive capacity, flexibility, knowledge production, knowledge management, knowledge ownership, intellectual property management. It's a different world. So Zimbabwe must embrace the new skills or start to embrace them in the year 2019 to grow the economy. Beyond Zimbabwe, we must not think about ourselves as an island. Under globalization, Zimbabwe won't make it as Zimbabwe. We're going to make it as SADC. We're going to make it as COMESA. We're going to make it as the African Union. Continental integration, regional integration. So again, in the transitional stabilization program, there's no leveraging of SADC. Yeah, I got the document here. There's no leveraging of COMESA. There's no leveraging of the African Union. Yes, let us have our plans in the economy in Zimbabwe, but driving our economy requires numbers, requires survival under globalization, and we must leverage SADC. We must leverage COMESA. That's what we need to do in the year 2019. The TFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, signed on the 21st of March 2018. These are the bodies in which you should anchor our economic programs. Why are we saying this? Continental integration is the only viable framework under globalization. The TSP does not leverage the region, the continent, or even the fourth industrial revolution. That must change for Zimbabwe. We must leverage the SADC industrialization strategy, the SADC infrastructure master plan, PIDA, and the EU Agenda 2063. I don't see any reference in the TSP of this program. These are programs driving SADC, driving COMESA, driving the African continent, which we as Zimbabwe, as we seek to grow our economy, must leverage. Why? Because we no longer talk about national competitiveness. We no longer talk about national attractiveness. We are concerned now with regional competitiveness. We are concerned now with regional attractiveness. We are concerned now with continental competitiveness. South Africa will not be attractive if Botswana is not attractive. South Africa won't be attractive if Zimbabwe is in turmoil. An investor in Japan, an investor in New York would want an attractive region, an attractive continent. So these are philosophies and concepts that we need to leverage as we seek to grow our economy in the year 2019. Think about it this way. What's our GDP? $12 billion. What's our population? 30 million people. South Africa, 55 million people. GDP, $350 billion. Botswana, 2.3 million people and GDP. This is chicken change. These are not economies. These are Mickey Mouse economies. Under globalization, they are nonsensical. They are meaningless, South Africa included. South Africa is too small to be a brick. They won't survive under globalization. We will survive and thrive under globalization if we go as SADC. What are the numbers? SADC, 280 million people. What is the GDP? $600 billion. Now we are talking. The FTA area, SADC, COMESA, and EAC, 630 million people. Potential GDP, $1.3 trillion. This is what we need to understand as Zimbabweans in the year 2019 and say, how do we leverage the region? How do we leverage the continent? It gets better. Look at China, 1.4 billion Chinese, GDP $11 trillion. India, $1.2 billion, GDP $2.5 trillion. America, 325 million people, GDP 19. These are now economies, not the other ones. These are serious players under globalization. And here we come as an African. If we work together as the African continent, our population is 1.2 billion people. Our potential GDP is $2.3 trillion. Now will make sense. Can you imagine if I was to rock up and say, here come, I'm the African. I speak on behalf of 1.2 billion people, and behind me, I have a GDP of $2.3 trillion. The Chinese will talk to us, not out of love, out of economics. The Americans will engage us, not out of love, out of economics. We must think as Zimbabweans how we can play a role in leveraging the continent, leveraging the 1.2 billion people, a market. How to leverage the collective GDP of $2.3 trillion. That's what we need to be thinking about as Zimbabwe. We can't have Botswana negotiating with China, Zimbabwe negotiating with China, South Africa negotiating with China. We get shortchanged. Why don't we go as a block? Can you imagine if I had to put our diamonds together, Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Angola, in a diamond cluster? We will dominate the world. We will name the price for the diamonds because we'll be the biggest diamond producer in the world. Platinum, South Africa and Zimbabwe working together, 95% of all platinum. We'll be the producers of catalytic converters. We'll be the drivers of the platinum industry. Oil cluster, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, and Niger. What we're simply saying is we can't operate as little nations and survive. Why don't you work in clusters and be able to enable our value? So we need to do things differently in the year 2019. And I will summarize, and we can have more information during the discussions in the areas. We must work on our macroeconomic issues, inflation, currency. Let us have interventions that are meaningful so that we can grow the economy. We must work towards a shared and inclusive economic growth by working on agriculture, working on mining, moving from acquisition of land to productivity, using science and technology in mining and agriculture, manufacturing, housing, gender, young people, devolution, expanding the tax base and collection efficiency of taxes. What are called consumer-facing industries. The future belongs to tourism, financial services, banking, insurance. That sector, which includes ICT and the fourth industrial revolution, can drive our economy in addition to our natural resources. Building, enabling public infrastructure, transport, power, water, sanitation. Seek first the kingdom of infrastructure and everything else will follow. You need infrastructure, okay? Human capital development, education, health, ICT, and the fourth industrial revolution. We'll be able to discuss this in detail as we have our session. Regional integration, emphasizing the Zimbabwean diaspora. Let us leverage our people in the diaspora. How can we use them to give us ideas, to give us networks, link up to the IMF, to McKinsey, the UN, to give us linkages to resources? How do we link up to SADC, COMESA, the African diaspora, the African Americans, Africans in the Caribbean? How do we leverage them in the Zimbabwean economy? Global issues, sanctions. Guess what? Here's the message on sanctions. There are two types of sanctions. Sanctions you impose upon yourself, and sanctions that others impose on you. My message on sanction is, we must address the sanctions we are imposing upon ourselves. Misgovernance, sanctions. Corruption, sanctions. Rigging elections, sanction. Killing all people are sanctions. The government of Zimbabwe has no moral authority to ask anybody in the world to remove sanctions when they're imposing sanctions on the people of Zimbabwe through brutality, through violence, through mismanagement, through corruption, and through the rigging of elections. So fellow Zimbabweans, your mandate, your charge is removing these sanctions you are imposing upon yourself before you even engage what others are doing on you. Dialogue must happen. The rule of law must be respected. Constitutionalism is important. Human rights are fundamental. You can't talk about the economy without addressing politics, without addressing the issues and matters of governance. And of course, implementation is critical. You must have what we call an implementation matrix. And I see they got something in the TSP, but very mediocre. They need help. The TSP is mediocre. Implementation matrix must be very clear. Who is going to do what? When are they doing it? Where are the resources coming from? What are the milestones? How do you measure success? Implementation, monitoring, and evaluation are fundamental, but done in a systematic and structured manner, not as done in the TSP. As we conclude, we are saying to Zimbabweans, to ourselves, we want a shared economic, shared economic prosperity, we want inclusive economic growth, but it has to be done in a holistic manner by addressing all matters. My concentration was on economic efforts, economic transformation, innovation, entrepreneurship, the fourth industrial revolution, regional integration, continental integration. I also spoke about macroeconomic stability, the currency matter, inflation, money supply, and all these things. But you can't discuss the economy outside politics. So the political matters must be addressed. Governance and legitimacy issues must be resolved. But always remember, we as Zimbabweans are going to be masters of our own destiny. We Zimbabweans are going to be the creators of our own destiny. In other words, we must become the change we seek to see in Zimbabwe. None but ourselves will be the creators of a new economy and grow our economy in the year 2019. What outsiders can do is help us help ourselves. I thank you so very much for this opportunity, and we'll say more during the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try. I'll also take this opportunity to say a few remarks about other questions or comments from Yeah. You know, on women and gender, let's start by saying human rights, women's rights are human rights, the rights of youth are human rights. We know that. But let's move to economics and say, when you empower women, when you empower girls, it's smart economics. There is the gender dividend. There's the youth dividend. There's a new word we use now called womenomics. The economy is driven by women. The economy is structured for women. In other words, we're saying the research is telling us that women are better leaders than men. Women are better managers than men. That company will make more money if it is led by a woman. That university will flourish if it is led by a woman. This country will do better with a female president. Now, the research is saying that. So what I'm emphasizing is, yes, to empowering gender, but also it's economics. 52% of the population. How can men design for women when you're not a woman? So anyway, let's move the discourse, yes, to human rights, but beyond human rights, young people and women, it's about economics. The environment, the same thing. There's what we call now creating shared value. When you save the environment, when you save communities, it's not charity, it's economics. You make more money because you are saving the environment. You are more sustainable because you are saving the community. We're moving away from social responsibility, where you make your millions and apologize by building a toilet. We don't want that. We want you to drive profits, to drive economic impact in the community and save the environment at the same time. That's a better framework. We call it creating shared value. Technology is a tool. There's no need for pushback, my brother. Don't push back the fourth industrial revolution. Technology is a tool, not a solution for the East, for the West, for the global South. Right now, you can organize a demo more effectively using what? Social media. Ask Pastor Ivan. He can run the whole country using one little video. That's the fourth industrial revolution in revolution. So yes, the capitalists, the rich people are going to use the fourth industrial revolution to empower themselves. But the poor people, the poor countries can also use the same tools to solve their own problems. Agriculture. You can modernize agriculture using cell phones, using the fourth industrial revolution. In fact, I'll give the colleague a paper we've done to show the major impact of agriculture in Africa using science and technology. The fourth industrial revolution is nothing but a tool. We had no brick and mortar banking. 80% of our population had no access to banking. The technology for mobile banking was discovered, and then M-Pesa and EcoCash came in. Yes, they made money, but they also empowered the woman, the young person, the Zimbabwean, to be able to bank on a mobile platform. So what is important is for us to identify our problems in society, our problems as young people, our problems in agriculture, and say, how can I use nanotechnology? How can I use big data? How can I use data analytics? How can you use blockchain technologies? How can you use the Internet of Things to solve my problems in the village? Shanda, I hope at some point they'll give a chance to talk about what you're doing using technology in the villages in Weta. So technology is nothing but a tool. I want to disabuse you of this notion of the global south and global north. The global north is God's fourth industrial revolution. We push back. Don't push back. Embrace technology. Use it for yourself. Technology is nothing but a tool. But more importantly, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used to destroy nuclear weapons, making money, destroying communities, but you can also use it to build. So what is important is for us as change makers, as game changers, to say, how do we use technology to make agriculture more productive, to organize our demonstrations, our struggle against the powers that be using artificial intelligence? So technology is nothing but a tool that can be used. I mean, and no one is safe, by the way, Kwisai. The Americans are in trouble today. They're frightened of Huawei, the Chinese company. Why? Because Huawei is the dominating force in 5G. Now, if Huawei goes global and dominates 5G, the Americans are worried about their secrets going to China. So what are they doing? They're trying to block the Chinese. So even big America is in trouble because technology is a double-edged sword. So they're trying to, attack Hawaii, arresting people. They're not safe. Technology is a major disruptor. It's a major equalizer. If we use it for yourselves by leapfrogging, very important, leapfrogging, jumping the older technologies and moving on. The example was given about Einstein and Steve Hawking. Very important. Those are what we call Renaissance men, Renaissance women, a physicist. Einstein has got so much to say about philosophy, so much to say about politics, about the law, but he was a physicist. The same applies to Steve Hawking. What I'm encouraging you here, don't tell me I'm a superstar economist. You're a superstar nothing unless you master technology, unless you master the Bible, unless you go to church. Do something outside your field. Then you become a Renaissance man or woman, then you can do better in whatever area you feel. So those examples are very interesting because Steve Hawking is a physicist and Einstein, but if you listen to what they have to say about revolution, about society, about the economy, you feel new types of jobs will come. 2030 vision. I hope there are government people here. When they came out first with this 2030 vision, I criticized it and they didn't listen to me. They only put one word, upper. Because when they started off, they were saying, Zimbabwe must become a middle-income economy by 2030, which I said, it's foolish. Middle income is very broad. I said, oh, Mutambara, try to be clever enough. Let's put upper. So what they're now saying is, Zimbabwe must become an upper middle-income economy by 2030. That's not good enough. It's one aspect. A national vision is bigger than that. So Zimbabwe does not have a national vision. You can't say Zimbabwe must become an upper middle-income country by 2030. That's lazy. Break it down. What do you mean? What about society? What about the politics? What about the mega impact projects? What are the cross-cutting issues? We need a collective national vision shared into by the opposition, by civic society, by the ruling party, by all Zimbabweans. This nonsense of having one word to say upper middle income and then think you are done, we must fix that. It's not good enough to say that. And we need to resolve that. The Minerals Act, the bill, look, that bill is not good enough. Forget the little reservation the president has on that. Does it empower the people as the owners of the asset? Does it give value to the asset underground? The major problem with mining laws in Africa is that they empower the investor over the people. The minerals underground belong to the people. And the laws in South Africa, in Angola, in Zimbabwe are criminal laws in the sense that they disempower the owners of the resource, which are the people, and they empower the investor. We must come up with a law that says the asset underground has value. And that value is what you use when you're negotiating with an investor who is coming into the country. Okay? The questions. Okay, I'll go to the questions now. In economic ideology, I've already answered some of the questions actually. Economic ideology, I think I would rather emphasize the idea of a shared national vision, prescribing what we want to do in 2030 and 2040, and then coming up with an economic strategy, the game plan that takes us from where we are to the promised land. But more importantly, we come up with an implementation plan that talks about the implementation matrix and the elements of achieving our vision. So rather than being ideological about it, I would rather be clear on what we want to do as a society, as a people, a shared economic vision, shared economic prosperity, shared economic growth, and very specifically what we want to do about governance, about politics, about our society, and then crafting a national strategy to achieve our vision, and then coming up with clarity on the elements of the implementation, and identifying what are called mega impact projects that will drive us to achieving that vision. So that's what, to me, would answer the question of ideology. Because right now, I don't want to be stuck into socialism, capitalism with my friend Gwisa here. I just want my people to prosper. I just want Zimbabweans to do well. And I see Singapore doing well. I see China doing well. I see the Americans in their own way doing well. I see Zimbabweans, Malawians in trouble. So I would rather we are more in terms of impact. What is it that we can do to empower the ordinary person? Raise up the size of the middle class. Raise up the material conditions of the workers. And that can be done within the framework I've given you. Dialogue, you are not listening on dialogue. I never said Chamisa in Mnangagwa. I was very clear. We need the opposition, we need civic society, we need business for a comprehensive dialogue. What I objected to was Mnangagwa calling 20 little losers to his state house and saying, I've got dialogue. That's not dialogue. 20 little lumpen elements. With my friend Maduku, one of them. Don't do that. We're grown-ups, we're not kids. The major protagonists politically are the MDC Alliance and ZANU-PF. That's one. Then you have civic society. Then there's business. Then there's our neighbors. So don't try to be clever and half. I'm negotiating. You're talking to 20 little losers. Why are you not talking to Chamisa? So not Chamisa alone. The opposition MDC Alliance, civic society, business, and maybe our regional players. What I object to is a monologue of losers. So I'm with you there. Comprehensive dialogue, not power-sharing discussions. Comprehensive discussions to discuss the economy. Comprehensive discussion to talk about political reforms to ensure that our future election is not disputed. So please, and at the same time I was critical of my friends in the opposition. I also said, please, be very clear about what you want. Drop the childish behavior, drop the double talk and the grandstanding. Let us be clear about the country. But don't disrespect MDC Alliance by engaging Maduku and Kosana. Please don't do that. We are not children, right? Interbank rate, MPS, you've heard my views if we're here. You can't even talk about that. I don't even want to discuss that. Where are the reserves? Where is the confidence? Where is fiscal consolidation? Where is productivity and business growth? Where are those things that must be in place before we discuss an MPS? So that interbank rate is meaningless because the fundamentals about ring fencing the deposits of poor people, the deposits of pensioners, the deposits of poor people, and I'm glad Gusai raised this. We are very sick in the head. We have the audacity to protect investments of the big multinationals because we want investors. And we destroy the savings of pensioners, the savings of poor people. Let us ring fence every depositor, more so the poor ones. And then we can carry out our currency reforms. But we need reserves to back the currency. We need productivity, we need business growth to back the currency. We need to make sure we cut down on expenditure. All those flights to Russia and China on hired planes must stop. If we are serious about fiscal consolidation, that's what I have got to say about the MPs. Zidera, look, I'm answering the question, Zidera. I've never supported sanctions against my country. If you look at my record as the leader of the opposition, MDC. And if you look at my record as Deputy Prime Minister, I've never supported sanctions. I'm not Steve Basiwa who discovered sanctions are bad yesterday. I've been clear from day one. But what upsets me is that people are obsessed about talking about Zidera when they're imposing sanctions on themselves. It pains me. It pains me. This is my flow. It pains me. What I'm saying is, look, I don't want sanctions against my country. And I don't even need to say it now because I've never supported them from day one. But what I'm emphasizing is, we as Zimbabweans must do something about things we control. We control our politics. We control corruption. We control the rigging of elections. We control brutality against our own people. Stop that brutality. Stop that corruption. Stop the rigging of elections. Because those sanctions you control. However, granted, I don't share Donald Trump's illusions about fixing Africans because I know, you know what he's trying to do? He's trying to tell South Africans, don't touch land. I know that. So the sanctions in Zimbabwe also have a global meaning to threaten other players. Stay away from the land. We'll do to you what we've done to Zimbabwe. What I don't want, though, is to be on the same platform with corrupt people, brutal people, dictators who are brutalizing on their own people. So I'm simply saying, I, as Arthur Mutambara, must take personal urgency, must do something about those things that I control. If I'm sitting on people, I must get up and not sit on people. If I'm corrupt, I must stop being corrupt. If I'm stealing elections, I must stop stealing elections. But however, beyond that, because I control that. Okay. So I've said enough. I've never supported sanctions, so I don't need to declare now, because I've never supported them. But I want to make sure we move on. EcoCash, we can't nationalize this, my sister. We must promote free enterprise. We must promote, I'm sure Gisa would love me saying this, we must promote innovation and creativity. And the downside, of course, is it's going to enrich some people, but also empowers others. Yes, Strive Baswa has made so much money from EcoCash, but it has also empowered many of our people. People now can bank. A rural person can bank on EcoCash, on Mupesa. So I think it's a trade-off. Yes, individuals are going to make money. Yes, we're not vulnerable to a private player, but that way we also empower our people. It's a chicken and egg situation, but I wouldn't advocate for the nationalization of EcoCash. I think let's promote entrepreneurship. Let's have more creators of wealth, and do that. The last one was on SA. And what was the last one? Was it?
Yes, you said you was arguing that SA is one that generates most of the revenue.
That's not correct. The GDP of South Africa is 350, okay? 350 million. And the collective GDP of Africa is 2.3 trillion and counting. So they themselves, they've got 50 million people. That's a market. By the way, there are two things I'm talking about, by the way. It is the population and the GDP. Population is about a market. Africans together, we are 1.2 billion Africans. South Africa has got 55 million people. So you can imagine now, 55 versus 1.2 billion. So they are not the driver of the market of Africa. They are very small. Nigeria is bigger. Even GDP is bigger. So no, that's actually why they are confused. They think that they got South African exceptionalism. You know, we are ballers, we are different from them. You are not different.